Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Hogan, and welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. I had the amazing honor and privilege this past week of finally hugging the neck of Danny Conway. Hi, Danny. Welcome.
Hi, Kelly. So great to be here and was so amazing to meet you in person after all these years, finally last week. Someone actually said, "You've never actually met in person?" I'm like, "No, we haven't. We just have an amazing Zoom relationship."
That's right. Our chemistry is so good, it reaches from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Exactly.
So, hack your health. For those of you, maybe I'll put some footage up while we talk, but it was awesome. It was my first hack your health experience. Was it your third?
Yeah, it was my third.
Third.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm hooked now. It was awesome.
It's always great to connect with people in person and meet people in real life. And, we exist outside of this online space. I mean, the online space is great. We're so lucky to have it. And it's also great to like actually, be in person with people and have that energy and all of that. So
Yeah. And you and I are lucky because we both, multiple times per week, get to sit in screens and have our own meetups, our own little carnivore meetups, and see people and talk to people what feels very face to face. In fact, I saw research that our brains react the same way to someone right now, like you and I, looking at each other in lifetime. Our brain registers that as a true human reaction, as if you were in the room, which I thought that's so cool. That's how it feels in our groups. You've been in mine, I've been in yours. But then there is something awfully nice about being able to put your hands around somebody, right?
100%.
Yeah. Okay, Danny. I wish we were just here to talk about accurate because I think we could do that very easily.
I know, huh?
But I do want to talk about carnivore potential problems and solutions. And I want to give just a little bit of an intro here, and then I'm going to hush and just let you talk. But I think you and I both know many people who do eat some whole food carbohydrates, along with hopefully lots of meat, and they still enjoy great digestion and a healthy body weight and clear skin and no sugar cravings. And that's great. It's just that you and I don't happen to be two of those people, right?
100%. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I enjoy how we eat. And for anyone who enjoys how they eat, if it's not carnivore, I just want to say, like, to start out with, I am so on board with do what works best for you. My approach for almost 20 years has never been one size fits all. And that's kind of like why I'm kind of like this rogue practitioner, rogue carnivore, because I'm all for what works for the individual person, as long as it's sustainable, as long as it gives them the results they're looking for, and as long as they feel amazing, most importantly.
Yes. So you and I do not go around insisting that every human is a total carnivore forever. In fact, you and I are both married to men who are not total carnivores, and we somehow manage to make this relationship work.
Uh, My husband, some days he is and some days he's not. And his thing is like, I'm not going to put a label on it. If I don't feel want to eat vegetables, I'm not going to eat vegetables. And if I feel like eating tomatoes because he loves tomatoes or onions or garlic or whatever, he's going to eat those foods. Does he eat foods that don't make him feel well? No, he doesn't. So that's the important thing as well.
Yeah. And some of us really do have very compelling reasons to do this carnivore thing. So for me, getting rid of the plants did allow my skin to clear up, IBS symptoms to go away, anxiety. I had a lot of nighttime anxiety, and then 130 pounds to be released. So while we are very accepting of other people saying, oh, well, I can eat some carbs. Okay. Here's what I think you and I are really not very tolerant of. People who insist that everyone must have carbs in order to fix a thyroid problem or a hormone problem, or who would say, don't do it for the long term. It's not safe long term. And that's when, oh, that's when I start feeling not dogmatic that everyone needs to do it, but more like, hey, eat your carbs if you can. That's fine. But some of us really need to eat this way and feel our best eating
Right.
this way.
Yeah, and I like to just kind of share if there's anyone here that maybe doesn't know my story. I mean, my journey started almost 20 years ago into the low carb keto space. And then a few years later, transitioning into carnivore. And truth be told, I did lose a lot of weight, low carb and keto. I think for me, ongoing, fast forward, obviously that was quite a few years ago. Carnivore gave me more results from a body composition standpoint. Carnivore gave me more results from a brain health, focus, mood standpoint. And I just didn't feel like adding carbs back was something that I needed to do. I love meat. I love fat. I love eating this way. And I would be happy if I never had to eat another piece of fruit again in my life. One thing I do with my clients is if carnivore is the way they feel they can eat forever, then great, let's do it. If it's something that they feel should be an elimination diet for a period of time based on whatever they have going on, because my focus is always healing the body, rebalancing the body from the inside out, then we do that for a period of time. And I want to get them to a place where they can add whole foods back in. We're never talking about processed foods, carbs, all of that. But if adding whole foods back in is their goal, my thing is I want to take them to from where they are to where they want to go, not where I think they should be. And there's a big difference there.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because you and I are perfectly happy and content and feeling great after years of eating meat.
Right.
You're right. I had a lady just this week say, I genuinely miss eating. And it was a vegetable. And I thought, I can't even imagine. Like, I can't. That's what you miss. Peanut butter. Sure, I can imagine that. But this
Uh,
vegetable.
yeah.
But yeah, if possible, of course, we would love for her to have this green thing that she misses eating without suffering any pain. She's not there right now. She's new.
Yeah. And on that note, I should say, like I always tell clients, if your goal is to add foods back in, my goal is for you to add those foods back in and not have a 3 day hangover from Brussels sprouts.
Surely could not be worth it. Oh, I hate the smell so much. My husband and my oldest child both love them. I'm like, I don't know. I've hardly have ever tried them in my life because I started eating only meat when I was 25. So
Right.
I don't know. I didn't eat a lot of Brussels sprouts in college. Let's put it that way. All right, Danny, how long have you been coaching people on a very low or no carb diet? So that doesn't mean that you don't coach other folks as well, but how long have you been working with people in this space?
About 18 and a half years,
And how long have you been testing hormones and running lab work on people within the carnivore and keto community?
about 17 and a half years.
Okay.
So the first year of my practice, I focused solely on the nutrition side of things. And then I started adding functional medicine in January of 2008. So actually not even a year later. And from then on, it was food is the foundation for everything that we do. That's how Nutrition the Natural Way, my practice, got its name. And then building on that foundation with hormones, with gut health, with whatever imbalances are going on. So the goal is always to rebalance the body from the inside out, making sure food is right first, because if food isn't right, nothing else can be right. And then building on that foundation from there with all the other areas.
I do interview a lot of people who just come on to share their experiences, and I love that. I just finished interviewing a lady who had her life changed by three things. Well, let's make it four: Jesus, carnivore, thyroid meds, and hormones. BHRT. These were the four things where she was like, wow. But this is not that kind of interview because Danny is not just sharing what happened to her. Danny is going to talk about what she has seen for 17 to 18 years in her practice, running not just blood. We talked about you in that interview, by the way.
Oh,
She had had a Dutch test done. I said, oh, I'm about to interview Danny Conway. Should be so pleased that you had done. And it really gave her a lot of answers. So during that time period, have you ever seen anyone on a carnivore diet have any problems?
yes.
She
I
said,
I get a lot of carnivores that have been carnivore for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and they've tried the carnivoring harder and that hasn't worked. So they've gotten some results, but not to the full extent of what their goals are. And so that's where we look deeper at the various testing, comprehensive blood work, urine testing, stool testing, other blood work, so on and so forth.
Okay. So, anybody watching, we are not here to say that if you only eat meat forever and that's it, that it will literally fix every problem you've ever had. It's a really good starting point, though. I mean, like a really good place. Like she said, food is the foundation of all of the problems you have ever seen people have. Think about like you just listed a whole slew of other things that it could be.
Sure.
How many times, just approximately, have you had to tell a carnivore, look, here are the problems. What I need you to do is bring back carbs to fix that problem?
Let me count in my head for here for a second. Zero.
Gosh, I thought you were really counting. I was like, like what? How? Oh man, there goes my sentiments for the rest of this video. Okay, you got me. Zero. In 18 years, that has not been the solution.
100%, 100% correct.
That's awesome. I asked Judy Cho recently via email the exact same question, and she said two questions. I said, "Has anybody had any problems on a carnivore diet?" She's like, "People have problems on every diet, of course." And I said, "And how many did you need to fix with carbs?" She said, "Nobody has a carb deficiency. Like, that's not the problem."
So, can I tell you a funny story about that really quick? So, years ago, I was 65 pounds overweight, fat-free diet, tons of hormone and gut issues. That's how I got down this path. Two of my biggest struggles were food cravings and excessive hunger. So, obviously, they go together. Not sugar cravings. I used to crave fatty foods, ice cream and fried foods and that kind of thing. And I always, looking back, once I started realizing that the reason I was craving those foods was because I didn't actually have enough fat in my diet, I always say, there was never a shortage of ice cream in my body. I just didn't know or understand how to read those cues that that's really what my body actually needed.
Okay, I like
So,
that. Yes. I also, of course, fell for the fat-free trap. And I did
yeah.
not, in fact, get less fat by doing that. No. And craved all the time. I wasn't like, I mean, I would eat it. Sugar necessarily, like just candy. It was more like candy bar, the fat part of it too.
Sweet fat.
Yes.
The
Oh,
most, it's the most addicting.
it it really was. And now you and I are just free from that. I was at the hair salon yesterday and I was going to be throwing a big party last night. And I provided a lot of flank and ribs, and everybody else brought the sides. And my hairdresser, who I've gone to for quite some time, she said, "Is that going to be hard for you?" I was like, "Making the ribs?" And she said, "No, I mean, being around those foods." And it was almost funny. I was like, "No. Oh gosh, that's not even food to me now." But boy, it used to be.
Well, and I think it definitely takes, if anyone's watching this and they're new on the journey or they feel like they're still sort of having that argument, that angel devil argument in their head of what they should be choosing, it first of all takes time for sure. And I spend a session in my group program, the Weight Loss Accelerator program, talking about the mind shift. So we have to shift our mindset, what I call non-caloric strategies for weight loss, which is about all of these things that we have to sort of self-conversation and looking at a hunger scale. I know you and I both have a sort of a different hunger scale that works for our clients. But all this is part of what you're saying of being able to be in a room like that with other foods and literally not have those foods talking to you the whole time that you're in there.
Yeah, it's almost like I thought of it before, like beautiful flower arrangements. I mean, people bought gorgeous dishes, desserts, that there was a time when there's no way I could have been there and not eaten multiple trips to go get it. And then the whole time just been thinking, I wonder if anybody would notice if I went back, just trying to, no, it doesn't hit. But you're right. That came with much time and abstinence for me, just abstinence and a lot of nourishment. Like you said, allowing yourself to have that fat. Okay. So you said you have seen some problems before in carnivores, just like on any other diet. What tends to show up the most? What are the main issues that you see arise?
So, overall, when I look at blood work and hormone testing, and, most of my clients are women over 40, so probably range 40 to 65, to be honest, is like 95% of my clients. And so what happens in this time frame and stage of life is that we're going through a lot of hormone shifts. So we have the some women at 40 are still premenopausal. Then we have the perimenopausal phase where things are just going crazy and we just might not know what's going on from one day to the next, from one month to the next, where a woman might have her cycle and then it's gone for 9 months and they think they're almost there. And then all of a sudden the clock starts over again to, of course, postmenopause, after hormones drop a bit and, things kind of have shifted. So within those hormone changes, we also have things slow down, digestion, liver detoxification. So a couple of the big areas I see women struggle with is the liver detoxification and digestion. So sluggish digestion, sluggish liver is terms that I use for that. And then kind of drilling down further, what affects those things: pathogen exposure, mycotoxin exposure, which is mold exposure, basically, stress. So whether it's environmental stressors or physiological stressors that are, we were exposed to something. I went to Mexico 10 years ago and I came back with diarrhea and my gut's never been the same. It sounds crazy, but I hear that a lot. That's a very common story. And those are just a few examples. I hope that kind of answers your question, but those are kind of overall. And all of those systems, so those body systems, the digestion, the detoxification, they play significant role with hormones. And so when I say that, what hormones are we talking about? We're talking about our stress hormones, cortisol, DHEA. They're connected to insulin and blood sugar. They're connected to leptin, with leptin resistance and satiety and hunger cues. And when all these things are, inflammatory markers, of course, come into play with those as well. When all these things are going awry and there's a lot of imbalances, these are all issues that some of them get a little bit better with diet for sure, because food is medicine and food does heal and it's the foundation of everything we do. But unfortunately, it doesn't rebalance everything. And that's an unpopular opinion for sure, because a lot of people say just eat meat and you'll live happily ever after. And Kelly Hogan and I both know that that is not always the case. But it is, if it is, you should keep doing that, because whatever you're doing is working. That means maybe you don't need to come see me.
Yeah, start there. Start by cutting out the processed stuff that's going to be awful on our guts or the fiber that's awful on the guts or whatever it is that's triggering and get to the elimination. Start with walks and sunshine and sleep. For heaven's sakes, there are plenty of people where it's like, whew, well, that was it, and then they don't have to go any further. But when a problem arises and somebody says, well, see, carnivore caused that,
Yes.
mm,
So this is what people, I think, forget, especially saying that carnivore caused a problem, is that most of these types of imbalances do not happen overnight. And it takes years for some of these things to actually progress. And then maybe some trauma or a life stressor or something will happen, or hormones will start shifting because of the stages of life that we were talking about earlier. And that's when things can start to be more prevalent and present and noticeable. And then we just did carnivore 6 months ago, and we blame carnivore because the time frame seems like it would work. But we don't know what was happening, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and what that progression looked like over a period of time.
right. So, soon to be 47. Let's say in the next 5 years, I start with perimenopause. I obviously, if I do have any issues, wouldn't say, oh, carnivore caused this because it's been so long. But what if I had been a new carnivore at around that season of life, or you caught a sickness or exposed to mold, and then it's like it kind of correlates, I guess, with that time period.
Yeah, and I'll share something that I I don't know if I've shared this publicly before. So my hormones, I'm 49. I just turned 49 last month.
Awesome.
And my hormones started shifting early, my late 30s. Kelly, for anyone who doesn't, I had breast implants. I had issues with the implants. I had them removed about 5 years ago. Best thing I personally ever did. If you have them and love them and they're working for you,
Mhm.
keep on, go on with your bad self. If you are having problems though and you can't figure those out, they very well could be a root cause. Speaking of root causes, my whole point in sharing this is my hormones started really shifting at 37. So I managed my hormones with food and diet for many years, for the last 12 years before my cycle started shifting and, eventually stopped. So these shifts and this whole perimenopause, menopause, all this time frame, it's very different for every woman. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong, bad, or otherwise. But I'm sharing that to say that, like you just said, you're 47 and things are still exactly on point how they should be. And I'm saying I'm 49 and I've been without a cycle now and managed all the symptoms for many years with just food.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. Seriously. You mentioned that implants, anything, I guess, unnatural that goes into our bodies, and I had somebody recently say that their dental work had caused a lot of issues. Uh, what are some we always hear we've got to get to the root cause healing, root cause. What are some other root causes?
Yeah, so some that we don't realize, dental work is a huge one. So from decay, the type of decay that we have to the type of materials that they're using if you're not seeing a biological dentist. So that can cause problems. Any type of foreign body in the body, so from implants to metal to any type of, some people, yes, they might need screws to fix something or whatever. Again, that can still cause issues. Surgery, anesthesia, those types of things can be problems, especially for those that have detoxification issues. Other root causes, environmental toxin exposures. So from mold exposure, so that's mycotoxin exposure, environmental toxins in and of themselves, to heavy metals. So heavy metals also related to the mouth amalgam fillings that they used years ago. And if you haven't had those removed, definitely recommend looking into getting those removed. Other root causes could be, like I said, there was, someone who traveled abroad and had digestive issues and thought that they went away a few weeks after returning. I have had women with chronic digestive issues, be able to take them back to a trip that they went to, like I said earlier, to Mexico or to somewhere where things kind of went awry, but they just kind of never got back to normal after that case, and things slowly kind of domino affected and, south, so to speak.
Yeah.
Another big one is trauma. So, emotional trauma, if we suppress emotional trauma, it's going to often come out in physical symptoms, especially digestive issues. Because why? Well, many of us have been emotional eaters. We've eaten or drinking or used something to numb whatever trauma that is. And that's why a lot of women manifest with digestive issues. We don't realize that it could be that, but that's a big one. Nervous system dysregulation, so that can stem from trauma or other stressors. And the nervous system stuff, the trauma stuff, this is like, I call this the unfun work. This is the real work
Yeah.
because following a macro formula, doing some walking, getting some steps, getting some sunlight, all that is great and it works.
Yeah.
But when you have to dig deeper and you've got to really kind of get into the nervous system and the what the dysregulation is, why it's there, and all of that trauma work, that's the real work, and that's actually the hardest part.
Yeah. I had a lady in one of my groups this week, and she was saying that she has had to sort of put tracking and macros on the back burner for right now because she and her therapist are in like the thick of the hardest part of her story. And she's like, right now, that's enough. I said, oh my gosh, yeah, that's heavy lifting. Like, You are taking care of something really important. She is sticking to she's doing carnivore because that's how she feels best. I said, that's enough. All right, you're giving yourself the nourishment that you need. We can get back to macros. That's but this can't wait. And she
Yeah.
knows the importance of it. But so many people, I even figured on that call, there were probably people thinking, what does that have to do with anything? It's a root cause of health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, trauma and stress.
It's definitely the one thing that is the hardest to face, of course. Why? Like, we don't want to, who wants to work on unresolved trauma? Like, it's the unsexiest, it's the hardest, however, if that is truly the root cause of why someone can't get their system regulated in other areas, it also has the biggest reward at the end because once that's dealt with, then all the other fancy things that they've been trying and the macros and the fat fast and the metabolic resets and all the things that you and I both love, all that stuff starts working.
You know the ACEs test, the survey on adverse childhood experiences. Have you
Oh,
looked into that?
I have not, but I've heard of it.
For anybody who thinks that a root cause of your health problem could not possibly be a traumatic experience that happened in the past, because I at one point probably would have thought, nah.
Oh, 100% me too.
Yeah, right? That seems so silly. Something that happened in your childhood is going to cause a heart attack 50 years later. Literally, yes. So they had people take surveys. It was the ACEs survey. I cannot remember how many questions were on the survey. And then they went in and found so many correlations between mental health struggles, which that I would have been like, well, that makes sense. But also general inflammation, heart disease, and the number of ACEs that people had, these adverse, negative, awful childhood experiences, correlated highly, specifically with thyroid problems. I've heard Dr. Bright say a thyroid problem, very often you will find a trauma at some point in the past to correlate. I don't know if you could say caused it, but somewhere in the past was there. And when I looked at that ACEs info, it really hit home. Like, it's not that if something bad happened that you're doomed. It just might mean you have to deal with it, whether that's talking with it or finding other ways to manage the stress of that and to get, like you were saying, your nervous system back to the happy parasympathetic side.
Right. So with thyroid, and you bring up a good point with thyroid because I think it's worth noting just because you and I both work with a lot of undereaters. So the undereating and thyroid is there's a huge connection there because most of the women that we work with have some history of chronic yo-yo dieting, of restricting 1,200 calories, 1,100 calories. It's kind of like the magic diet number in diet culture. And they've been on and off those diets for many years. And at some point during that time, their thyroid issues might have come up, but nobody then 10, 15 years ago was talking about, oh, just find the root cause, But then now, if we kind of fast forward a little bit and get them eating the way they should be eating, the correct amounts, the right macros, proteins, fats, and I'm just going to go so far as to say, and carbs if they're eating carbs, I do not think carbs are inherently bad. I'm just going to put that out there
Right.
because, I think that there are some dogmatics in this space that would say that. Again, if you thrive on carbs, go for it. All that to say, back to the thyroid again, the under eating is a big piece of that puzzle. And women don't always realize that. But, under eating, over fasting, and then making sure that they get to a place where things are aligned before they start, trying to fast or trying to do again some of these more fancy things. So,
Would you say that under eating for a long period of time, is that considered a root cause? When people say we got to fix the root cause, if someone is purposefully eating, I don't mean like I have no appetite, I'm not hungry, as in for years you tried to stick to this 1,200 calorie deficit. Could that
yes.
be root
Yeah.
cause?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked me that question because for at first when you were asking me for a list, it didn't register. But what can happen is let's say the thyroid goes awry. Whenever there's a thyroid imbalance, in my experience over the last almost 20 years, there's almost always an adrenal imbalance. When someone has adrenal stuff going on, there's not always a thyroid problem going on. So those two areas of hormones are very connected. Obviously, adrenals, stress. And then what's connected to the adrenals, the cortisol and DHEA, we have estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So all those hormones, if you looked at a hormone chart, they're the steroid hormones, the backbone is cholesterol. If we're not eating enough cholesterol or saturated fat, we don't have enough raw materials to make the hormones, and things start slowly becoming imbalanced or becoming low, and so on and so forth. That's kind of like the progression over time that someone might not realize was a factor years ago. But then when their stage of life changes, perimenopause, menopause, etc., and they start to have these imbalances or these symptoms coming up, they're not realizing that, yes, those all those, hundreds of days and months and years that I spent dieting has an effect on all this stuff now.
And that's a case where perhaps adding carbs appears to fix a problem because if they're under eating meat, I'm not hungry, I don't want meat. And then you say, I add back carbs, and you're suddenly giving yourself, especially if they were under eating fat, you have to have either fat or carbs for energy, one or the other. So then it can somehow feel like, oh, the carbs fix the problem. Could that, does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's two reasons why I believe that some think that the carbs fix the problem. Number one is they're a fast energy source. I mean, they just are, and it takes some people time to get fat adapted. And a lot of people come into carnivore with mineral imbalances and mineral deficiencies already. And then there are people in the space saying, don't use salt, don't use electrolytes, you don't need that. And now you've taken someone who already had mineral deficiencies and electrolyte imbalances, and you're telling them not to use salt and electrolytes because they've not figured out, there's an overwhelm of information out there. They're trying to do all the things. This can create more imbalances. So that's the first thing that I want to mention. The second thing you just talked about with not feeling like eating meat, there's two reasons that I see very commonly. We could call it meat aversion. We could call it not feeling like eating meat. Number one is poor digestive enzymes, poor HCl production. So that definitely is a factor. Using some digestive enzymes or HCl for improving HCl production is a very easy thing to try and just see if it helps. What I see often cause meat aversion, and I actually don't hear many talking about this, but I've seen it with a lot of clients, is low B1 specifically. So a lot of times low B1 can cause some nausea, and it can cause, I see it an issue with clients that are doing their detoxification protocols, and they all of a sudden kind of develop this meat aversion. But then we add B1 and the meat aversion actually goes away. So a lot of people think it's just from too much meat too soon or they can't process it or whatever. And I think the processing of it can be a thing, especially if someone's coming off of a lot of vegetables, and their body's not used to processing or digesting meat, so to speak. But those are, two more, I would say, root causes. And then another thing that came up in my mind as you were talking a few minutes ago, as far as like mood changes, anxiety, depression. So, anxiety and depression are, while they're brain or neurotransmitter symptoms, they are digestive issues because if we don't have the correct absorption of our amino acids, our bodies can't take those amino acids and make them into neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. So there's a deficiency, for lack of a better word there, or imbalance. And that's what can also create depression and anxiety, which is why when many people go carnivore, those are some symptoms that are very much alleviated for many people after just eating meat, which is great. And then some that maybe don't have improvement right away with just eating meat, we have to do more to fix their digestion and their leaky gut.
Yeah, if you're not digesting, if everything you eat is basically going through you, I saw some poop talk on your Instagram today. If everything you eat is in liquid form or floating afterwards, you're not absorbing. So you might say my macros are 80/20. Well, if 80% of that 80% was in the toilet, I'd say it probably didn't make it to your gut or to your brain.
Yeah.
So I've always heard that a lot of the mental health is really a gut health issue
Yes.
root. You
Definitely.
mentioned carbs are not the enemy. Carbs are not all carbs are bad. We can get pretty carby even on carnivore. If somebody says, I've got to get some carbs, boy, do we have good news for you. I mean, milk, kefir, scallops, oysters, mussels, eggs, heavy cream.
Scallops and mussels are my favorite. So when I eat mussels, I eat a plate of mussels because it's my meal.
Yeah.
And that plate of mussels has over 20 carbs in just that plate of mussels.
Right. So if someone does literally say, I've had people say, gosh, I just don't sleep as well without carbs, but yet they can't add back fiber because of the other issues they were having, and they don't want to add back anything to trigger their old addictions. We have options. You can still have some carbs. Again, that's probably not the root of your sleep issue is a
Right.
muscles or scallop deficiency. But if it helps somebody sleep better, great.
Yeah, and I think with the sleep issues, because I think I was just actually talking in my stories the other day that insomnia is one of the top, I would say top five complaints that I hear. So under eating, huge issue with sleep problems and blood sugar dysregulation. I think under eating overall in general and under eating fat. So that's definitely a factor. And again, as far as the carb thing goes, and I like to be real about this. Scallops and mussels. Some people might not be able to eat scallops and mussels every night of the week if they can't get, cost-effective versions of them. That being said, once in a while, do that once in a while. Do the other things that you were talking about, once in a while if dairy is tolerated. Obviously, if dairy is not tolerated, it takes a little bit of, being a little bit more creative or whatever. But there are definitely ways, which actually leads me to something that I wanted to mention is let's say if someone does feel like the need to add carbs back, I always would start with these foods that we're talking about. I would never have someone start with a sweet potato or with something super high glycemic or even, vegetables because of the fiber and gut issues that they could cause, especially if someone's had the gut issues from those foods before. So being smart about how you're adding things back, because I heard it mentioned a few weeks ago that was like they just went from like there was a recommendation to go from like under 50 carbs to like 250 carbs. That is terrible advice.
Right.
I'm sorry. Even if you're not carnivore, that's still terrible advice. So everything should be, I believe, low and slow, assess the tolerance, see how things go. And that's how I approach food. That's how I approach protocols and all the things. So
If you do tolerate dairy, it is really easy to get carbs in. I didn't even mention cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. All of these are pretty darn carby. If that's all you think you're missing in your life.
and like I was saying, I think I said this a minute ago, but people have to remember like carbs are going to be a fast energy source. So if you say, well, I was eating 30 carbs a few weeks ago and I feel better, and you've gone carnivore and all of a sudden you're not feeling as well, there's probably stuff going on under the surface and needing to address that, the electrolytes, making sure you're eating enough, all the things that we've already talked about really come into play at that point.
So sweet potato on its own will not, while it is a root vegetable, will not fix a root cause issue. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
and
you've talked about several what a sweet potato is not going to fix your trauma. It's not on its own going to fix your under eating unless you love them and then it like, oh, look, I'm eating more. It's not going to get rid of your heavy metals or your parasites. It's not going to get rid of your mold exposure. It's not going to fix the root cause, but it might make somebody feel better. And if that's the case, Danny or I, neither one is like, don't you dare, because it's not carnivore. We don't care. But
right,
that wasn't the root issue.
correct. And so I actually got asked a question a few weeks ago, and I think now would be a good time to maybe talk about it. So someone said to me, Why do I see all these people adding carbs back and all of a sudden they're losing weight?
Good question.
Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, let's do because I have a theory on this too. I want to see. We haven't talked about this one.
Oh. So what I see is that they've all of a sudden gone from eating too much nutrient-dense food like butter, pork belly, very fatty meats. They've now replaced those fatty meats with carbohydrate foods, vegetables that have they're much less nutrient dense as far as protein and fat goes. So their consumption of energy, so energy, i.e., calories. So I teach energy a lot because we want to have enough energy and consume enough energy to be able to expend enough energy. And who likes the word calories? Not me.
Not
So
Bart
with
K. That's who. Not Bart K.
so with that being said, if you go from eating butter and ribeyes to eating leaner meats with carbohydrate foods, even a sweet potato that has less calories overall, they're going to see a drop in weight. Does that mean it's the right drop in weight or the right effect on their hormones or metabolism or muscle mass or whatever the case is? No, doesn't. So if you're only looking from a weight loss perspective and you want to know why someone that adds carbs is all of a sudden losing weight because maybe they were getting too much energy for what their bodies needed before via butter and ribeyes, and now they're eating lean chicken and some veggies, and all of a sudden they've reduced their calories, maybe unknowingly, I don't know, by 1,000 calories. Like, of course, you're going to lose weight. And then let's talk about what kind of weight it is. Is it lean tissue? Is it fat loss? Like, what is actually happening in the context of weight loss, which is a whole other conversation, but I wanted to kind of bring that up.
Oh
Your
yeah, that's right. The composition of what weight is being lost definitely matters. But yeah, I'm with you. People are like, so what's the magic about adding carbs? I'm like, I don't think there's a magic about adding carbs. They're eating a lot less. I'm just going to say calories. They're eating way fewer calories. And I've even spoken to someone I know that has started losing weight. And I said, wow, do you know why it would happen that you added squash or whatever it is and the scale is dropping? She's like, well, I'm filling up on that. That was her words. I can really fill up on that. And then I don't eat as much. You're like, oh, I do think many of us had tried that technique. Okay, so if you're watching this video and you have never considered eating lean meat with a with half of your plate covered in vegetables, lean meats, and eating in a calorie deficit to lose weight, where have you been for all of diet culture ever?
The Slim Fast plan can live up to its pledge because each shake is a delicious, nutritious, low-calorie meal. Have one shake for breakfast, one shake for lunch, then eat a sensible dinner.
That's
So
every commercial growing up that I ever saw, right? And then you should drink your protein shake first thing in the morning and eat your lean meat and all your vegetables. And then for some of us, that was a train wreck. We really do, for our hormones, need the fat. And if you have carbs and fat, it can be done, but it's kind of
yeah,
a
that's
delicate balance.
yeah. Back to the okay, I took away fat and added squash and started losing weight. Well, there's still fine tuning that can be done within high fat that doesn't include just, adding squash if someone doesn't do well on those foods.
Like you said, you can overdo fat at the cost of having almost no protein. And then that's going to be a fail for folks. So, yeah, okay, adjusting macros, dealing with stress, just thinking about non-carb solutions.
Right.
We can always play with macros. We can always add carbs via animal foods. So, I guess I should say non-starchy, planty carbs.
Yeah.
Other solutions. What might people do other than just the things that we just listed?
So as far as like targeting root, do you mean as far as targeting root causes
Yeah,
kind of thing?
fixing a root cause problem without needing to add something back that might actually cause problems.
So I think proper resistance training, this is definitely going to be aligned with looking at how the sex hormones are, especially testosterone for women. So proper progressive overload, proper strength training, not too much, not too little, balance of cardiovascular training with the balance of resistance training. So I think that's really important for hormone balance, mental health, mental energy, physical energy. It's so interesting because if we are struggling with fatigue or low energy, the last thing we want to do is exercise. But what happens is when we exercise, it actually helps our energy.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a struggle for some people to get to a place where they can. In fact, I actually just met with a client 2 days ago where she's like, I am so excited. I actually jogged on my walk. Not that she's gonna, wants to go do any running, but the point is she had the energy to jog on her walk where she came to me with debilitating fatigue. And she's, been on her protocol for maybe 3 weeks and she's already noticing this kind of change.
Awesome. Thyroid medications, BHRT, like, are these strategies you also use?
Okay, so the thyroid medication is definitely a touchy subject because everyone typically wants to get off of all medications,
Right.
which I'm behind if that's appropriate for the person. That being said, there are definitely people that can thrive on small amounts of things if their body needs those supports. The difference is thriving without symptoms versus taking something that a prescriber is only trying to get the numbers to look good on paper and they're still struggling with all these symptoms. So in my practice, I never see, I always like to say, the root cause of a thyroid problem is never really a thyroid problem. So if we can rebalance the digestion, the detoxification, and all those other factors that we've spent talking about that are related, I often see improvements in those hormonal areas. And maybe someone can reduce their meds a little bit or a lot of it, either way. You also asked about BHRT, bioidentical hormone replacement. So I think that there's a time and place for that as well. It's never my first go-to. I want to get all of the body systems working the best that they can before we start to go down that path. The reason is if someone has very, very low hormones, which they very well might perimenopause, menopause stage of life, and you just add hormones, which are usually prescribed in higher doses. And I know this because women come to me and they're like, I went on BHRT and I felt terrible and I don't understand why, because someone said they would feel great. What's happening is I like to give the analogy that the hormone receptors have been sleeping for many years. And if you just give a shot of hormones and all of a sudden they have all this hormone, they don't really know what to do with that. So starting very low dosages, low amounts, and sort of poking them. Hey, wake up. Hey, receptor, can you just wake up a little bit? Can you just wake up a little bit more? And kind of slowly increasing. I find that to be the best approach if someone does want to go that route and they feel like that's appropriate for them. And quite frankly, I've seen a lot of BHRT be life-changing for many women when it's done correctly.
Yeah, I hear horror stories and then hallelujah praise reports. I've seen it go both ways many times. Not that I'm prescribing, I'm just listening. I'm just sitting back and going, well, did it help? My dog showed up. Uh,
Like,
yeah. All right, Danny, I know our hour is up.
ah,
And I know
that
the
was
babies, I mean,
so fast.
it's always a quick hour with you. And there are probably people who still say, gosh, I have more questions. Well, good. We want you to have more questions. What we don't want you to do is show up on Instagram and hear somebody saying carnivore causes cortisol problems, so don't do it long term. And that's what I have heard recently from some folks. Typically people who have number one, never actually tried carnivore, and number two, have no medical background, have none of your credentials at all. It's just that they heard some story somewhere that made them think carnivore ruins your cortisol. There are many factors that can contribute to high cortisol, and the root cause of that is never, like we said, the sweet potato deficiency.
Yeah, of course. And speaking of credentials, I actually also remembered I'm also a board certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, which I forgot earlier when you asked me. So I thought I would just add that in there.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you did. So I'm going to encourage people. Look, if you're watching this right now and you are still eating Doritos, and or something and you're going, gosh, I don't know why I don't feel so good. Let's clean that up. The foundations, food, movement, especially some strength training, outdoor walks, sunlight, sleep, stress management. If you start with that and then you end up with miraculous results, well, you just saved yourself a lot of money. I mean, really, that's great. And if that isn't the answer, there are people like Danny, and of course I'm going to link to her, who can test. She always says, test, don't guess. I love to Hack Your Health. People would come up and go, hey, test, don't guess.
I know, I love that. That was like made my day. That was like, oh, my heart.
Yes. And she knows how to do the real test, not the, oh, well, they tested my blood cortisol at 9 a.m. on Tuesday the 20th and it was fine. And it's like, that tells us nothing. Nothing.
Right. Yes, and I will say too, so even with we'll just say the simple stuff that you were just mentioning, the macros, the resistance training, the sunlight, all of that, I also find that, especially in this space, and you can kind of speak to whether you hear this from your people, is that there's so much information out there. Sometimes it gets overwhelming and people try too many things too fast. They try changing something every other day and that doesn't work. So what I like to focus on is sometimes having a plan and a strategic process of adding the things in and changing them up along the way rather than just trying to throw all the spaghetti up on the wall and hope that it'll stick. No pun
Yeah.
intended. That can be a part of the process, or that might need to be a part of the process as well. Like taking a step back, really looking at how many things you're doing, how many things you've changed at one time. Maybe, you know, making a list of those things and then starting one at a time and going from there. Or you can, enlist Kelly or I and we can help you do that.
Yeah, it does help to have people to do it with. I mean, truly, you and I think, have both tried this on our own, and we have had some success on our own, and now we get to meet with people every week. And I sometimes come meet with you and your people, and you meet with me and my people, and then, yeah, it helps to have support. But when I first went totally carnivore, I did have support, and they said, because I'm asking, well, what about should I do this and this and that? Like, let's get the food first. Let's just get that. Do not worry about, and they encouraged me, do not go out running, or they didn't even want me worrying about lifting, the gym. They said first, the food. It's going to be hard at first. And I'm glad they did it sort of step by step and not, okay, from day one.
Do everything.
Yes, everything. Where are your blue blockers? Where,
Yeah.
yeah, everything. It's a lot.
When I started years ago too, I didn't have to go cold turkey on the food side of things because I didn't have like a clear carb addiction per se. But I feel like for me, that's why this was so successful because I was able to make gradual changes. For some people out there, cold turkey is the way to go, like it was for you, Kelly. So just to clarify that, but there's many, many ways that people can be successful.
Yeah, I like that. If somebody were to quit drinking and they say, I haven't had a drink in 5 years, it wouldn't be like, well, but did you do it cold turkey or did you wean? I was like, who cares? You got off of it. Like, good job. And there are some people where rip the Band-Aid, I never touch it again is the strategy, and others where my husband, that would be like the worst strategy to take with him. It's just gonna have to be a real slow taper. We're on year 16 now and he's getting closer. Any day now. The world's slowest man.
I know, maybe don't go as slow as James.
Don't go as slow as James, is what she's trying to say, 100%. But hey, Danny, thank you. Thank you. I know it's been confusing for folks lately. I go online and you see people saying longtime carnivores are healthy. And I'm like, well, dang, I hate to hear that because here I am. And it's like, but I feel great. And I love eating this way. And it makes me happy. And I'm not struggling with high cortisol. But
Yeah,
if it's enough to make me stop and go, uh-oh, can you imagine if it wasn't year 16 or 18 or whatever, and it was day 16? That has to be a little disconcerting.
for sure. One of my favorites is you can't build muscle on carnivore.
Oh, right. Yeah, like we don't have any strong men and women in this space. Impossible. You must have a carbohydrate. Yeah.
Right.
So if nothing else is taken from this, I hope it's a little bit of peace of mind that if you know that carbs didn't work for you, I don't care who they work for, you, whoever's watching, if you know they didn't work for you, you don't have to go back to them. There are so many ways to troubleshoot in this space that don't involve anything that caused gut distress and that to dig deeper. And if you need somebody like Danny to help you get to the actual root cause of why it's happening, and you're pretty sure it wasn't from a sweet potato, then she could help. And if you decide at some point that you're healed enough and feel good enough that you want to try adding a sweet potato, by George, she can help with that too. Yeah, there's a right and a wrong way to add back carbs. And you and I have both been looking into that for quite some time, even though it's of no interest to either of us.
Yeah, just to clarify, we haven't been looking into it for ourselves to add back in. I just do that strategically with clients because everything should be about strategy. Everything shouldn't just be, oh, I heard this, I heard that. Strategically implementing things over time is the best way to go.
I even have I don't know if I should say this here, but I even have a chapter in my handbook on the safest way and strategies on how to add back carbs if someone thinks that they are ready, even though I have no interest in doing it, but it doesn't mean that there won't be people that we work with that that
I
want
think
to try.
Right. I think it's important because we don't subscribe to everyone should do the same thing and everyone's ready for the same thing. And, I think that there's enough dogmatic information out there. And if someone can feel safe coming to your group or my group and know that, I don't like labels. You have an amazing handbook, so it's only one little part.
It's just one little part. And one of the most important parts in it was nobody ever has to. You don't have to feel confident. And I'm going to put this video in that chapter as far as like, if you don't want to, have no fear. One of my dear friends has not had anything but steak for 27 years, and she is doing fantastic. She, her husband, her children, they're doing great. So you don't have to. You've got other strategies. Thank you, friend. We've recorded together before. I'm sure we'll do it again. It's always my pleasure. So thank
Thanks
you.
for, thanks for having me. I wish I could give you a big hug, but virtual hug.
And for the rest of you, we hope to see you back next Saturday. Bye.